Okay, this is an introduction to Adobe Premiere Pro. This is the start screen for Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2018. Versions of Premiere differ slightly, so if yours looks slightly different, then just look for the same option in a different place. So we're going to dive right in by clicking New Project. So this screen might look a bit different for you, but what we're looking for is the location so that we can pick a folder to store the project in, ideally on an external hard drive or a USB stick, or just on your computer if you don't have one of those. So I have this one called Asia made already. Select, and we can name the project and click OK. First of all, we're going to download an image. So I'm going to go to Google and just Google old map of Asia. And click images. And if you go to tools, this isn't completely necessary, but if you go to tools, you can click usage rights, labeled for reuse, to avoid any copyright issues depending on what you're going to do with your video. And we're looking at these numbers here. So this is the size of the image. We want nice big images that have a good image quality, so the bigger the better. So that's anything above 1920 by 1080. 1920 by 1080 is the resolution of the video we're going to make. So this one looks nice. I'm going to click it again. I'm going to right click, save image as, and going to go to my folder that I've set up and save. Now we can go back to Premiere. This bottom left panel is the project bin, or the project folder, where you store all the images and footage and music and everything that you want to include. Again, it might be in a different place, but it's usually here in the bottom left. If the panels ever move around and you're getting confused and something's not where it should be, you can go to Window, Workspaces, and Reset to save layout, and that should take you back to the original layout. So we're going to go to the project folder, and we're going to right click and click Import, or you can press Control and I to do the same thing. So we're going to go to the folder, and so these are some things that I've downloaded in preparation. I have some footage of China, some images of the body, an arrow. This is just from Google Images. A torn piece of paper to write some text on. So we're just going to begin by importing the map that we just downloaded. And so to move it into the timeline, we just drag it from this folder to this panel here, which is the main timeline. This is where everything happens. You can see here that we can drag this marker in time. You can see the time moving up here in seconds. So this clip lasts for 4 seconds. We can click what's called the track or the image, and we can drag the ends out. We can move it up and down. So we can have it playing for, let's say, 10 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. So once you've started your project and imported something into the timeline, we need to check that the resolution is correct. So we need to go, because what will happen is the resolution will set automatically to whatever the size of the image or the footage is that you use. And so in this case, that will be too big. So we're going to go to sequence settings, and we need this frame size to be 1920 by 1080, 1920 across by 1080 down, and you only need to do this once at the beginning, and we'll just click OK. Now you can see the frame's got smaller, so the image, if we double click here, we can see the edges are out of frame, which is good. It's a nice and big image that we can manipulate and add some effects to. So let's just add something else. If we go back to import, and one of these is just I think I took a picture from a book on my phone. Again, we can drag this in, and we can drag this so that it begins after our 10 seconds. And to the next scene, and you can drag this to make it longer. I'm also using the mouse wheel just to move up and down, or you can drag this as you would a document, and you can zoom in and out by holding Control, Alt, and the mouse wheel. So this is zooming out and zooming in. Now we're going to go back to this first image, and we're going to move it around, pan it, and zoom in on it. So add some movement, add some animation to this 10-second frame. So to do this, we make sure that the clip is selected, goes white, and if we move up here and click Effect Controls, using keyframes now is the core skill required to use Premiere. Once you know how to use keyframes, you'll know how to use everything. So we can, again, if we move this, it moves here. If we move this, it moves here. You can see the time changing when we do this. And here we have the scale and the position, and you can drag these to change it, or you can click on them and add you can add whatever you want it to be. And we're going to now say we want to zoom in on let's say, I don't know, I guess Beijing's around here somewhere. So this blue crosshair here is called the anchor point, and it's the point that you want the center of the image to be, the point that you want to zoom in on. So we're going to move that around here, and you see once you do that and you change the scale, it sort of changes it around that point. And we're going to say we want to start, say there. And so we need to add now a keyframe that will lock it in at that position at that time. So to do that, we're going to click these stopwatches here. So we want to change the scale. We're going to turn the animation on scale. It's added a keyframe automatically. at the beginning, and we're going to move this along, and we're going to say at the end we want another keyframe. So we're going to add a keyframe by clicking here. 2 keyframes, and you can jump between them with these arrows. This one's at the beginning, this one's at 8 seconds. You can drag them around, and so we want the second one to be zoomed in more. So if we zoom this in, the second one, what you'll see is the first one stays the same, the second one is zoomed in, and if we play between them, it will zoom in. And the trick here is to play around, to experiment, to get used to working with this. It can be a little bit complicated at first, but you soon get used to it. So, you know, drag them around, change the figures, and see, once you've worked out how to do this and you feel comfortable with it, you'll realize that all of these options work in exactly the same way. So we could, I mean, I wouldn't for a map, but we could turn on rotation, and we might add another keyframe at the same endpoint as scale for rotation, and we might spin the map around slightly, and so looks quite good. You can select them by dragging across them. You can move them all. You can delete them. You can turn it off, and we're back to the beginning. You might, for example, not want to zoom, and you just want the map there, but you might want to pan. And to pan, it's the same principle. So let's say we wanted to start here. We turn on the animation, it adds a keyframe automatically. We say we want to end over here. We move this position. You know, we move it up a little bit. Move this marker back, and we can see a nice smooth zoom. That's the main thing to practice. That's the core skill. You can right click a keyframe, and you can go on temporal interpolation, and you can click ease in. You can do it again and click ease out as well, and what you'll see is that will start it slower and speed it up, and you could do that with the last one. Ease in, ease out. We could drag these around, move it right to each end of the clip, and we can see it starts a bit smoother. And slows down at the end before going to the next clip. You can even, at this point, expand this option here, the position we're looking at. And this is a visual representation of that speed. So it starts off slow and gets faster. And you can mess around with these handles here. You can drag them up and down. And again, the key is just to experiment. Because, oh, you have to have this selected, sorry. So what I've done, actually, if you can drag this across as well to make it easier to see. So you can see these handles, you could drag it like this. Now this means that it's going to be slow, 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 fast, 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 slow, 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 slow. So you can see it going very, very slow, and then it's going to zoom across. You know, a bit too jerky, but you can maybe do this. And again, you just play around. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to add some text and some graphics on top. So I'm going to move this back down to here. I'm just going to move this across. I'm going to make this image a bit bigger. And no, actually, I'm going to keep this the same size, but I'm going to add a color underneath so it's not black. And to do that, we can go back down to the bin, right click, click new item, and click color matte. Click OK. And if we click on the color selector and click here, select that color, click OK. That's fine. And if we move this upper track, we can put the color matte underneath, so it looks a bit smoother. And you can add as many tracks here as you like. So if we go back and import this arrow, I'm going to add the arrow on top and double click it. We can make it a bit smaller and say we wanted to say something about the head. Might go like this. And we could choose to just have it come in a bit later than everything else by turning the opacity here down to 0. And we'll add a keyframe. We'll put this keyframe right at the beginning. And then a few seconds in, we'll put the opacity up to 100 and it will fade in. And we could move that around in the same way that we've moved the map around. We could add some text by going to File, New, Legacy Title. And you can add text and shapes in this panel. So I will type head in case people didn't know that that is a head. We can change the font. I like this font. Let's change the color. Let's make it bold. Book. Let's add a shadow and let's just put it there. And again, we have to drag it across and we can just add it to a new layer at the top. Now, if you wanted to move the head and the arrow, the head text and the arrow at the same time, we can select both. We can do that by dragging over them or clicking and holding shift and clicking another one as well. Right click and click nest. That will nest these two into one so that anything we do to that will happen to both. So we could say that we wanted it to end up here and we'll put a keyframe, but we wanted it to slide in from the bottom, and we can just take it down just off the screen. So we'll go like this. Okay, now we're going to add some footage. So we will go back and import. And I've downloaded some footage from archive.org. some old footage of China, and if we double click, it will open the footage in this panel, and you can scroll through by dragging this, and if you want to be a bit more precise, you can just drag this back and forth. And so this footage here is 18 minutes long, so I'm going to drag through. I'm going to do this just quickly. I'm going to look at, say, this part here. So I'm going to use this bit to select more precisely. I'm going to move to the beginning of this particular shot, and once this is in the right place, if we right click and click mark in, this will mark it at the beginning here. Then we're going to drag through quite like that scene. So we're going to drag it to the end of that scene here, right click, mark out, and you've just selected that bit. So if you then right click and click make subclip, we'll have another shorter clip taken from this clip in the project bin, and you can drag this across and add it. Now it's too small, so we can then right click, and you can always return to the effects here, and we don't want to turn the keyframes on, but we just want to scale it up a little bit, so you can do that there, or you can just do that here. Okay, we're going to go back. Sometimes it's hard to right click here when there's lots of stuff in here, which I find a bit frustrating, but you can right click here and click import. I'm going to import another of these images. I'm going to add it after this clip, and you can cut these clips down in here as well. So if you wanted it to end there, you could drag this down. We'll put this here, drag this out. Let's say we want this like this, and now I'm going to add a transition between this footage here and this image. So in this panel, we can go to effects, and we have lots of different video effects. You can change, you can blur the footage, you can change the color. But if we close this by clicking this arrow and go to transitions, we can have, so if you go to wipe, let's just say checkerboard. If we drag this, now you have to drag transitions to the transition part that you want to add it to, so not on the actual item, but in between. So if I zoom in a bit here, you can then click on the actual transition, and there's usually some variables you can change. You can change the duration, for example, so you can make it a little bit longer. If you play, something to play around with.